one of the individuals that was in the body. He was at the floor of the House of Representatives is Senator Bill Hagerty, and he joins us to reflect on exactly what we heard last night and what we can expect from 43 days and beyond of the presidency of Donald Trump. Senator, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Hope you're well.
Likewise, Matt. I'm doing great, and last night was just outstanding. I don't think there could have been a greater contrast drawn between President Trump and Joe Biden. If you think about it, in February of 2021, right after Joe Biden got into office, he flew over to Munich and made this claim that, quote, America is back. All President Trump had to do is stand up there and say, after just 6 weeks, America's back. We've accomplished more in 6 weeks' time than Joe Biden did. More positive things. Joe Biden did a lot of negative things that we can talk about. But the contrast could not have been more clear. And the energy in the audience was also quite different, too. The Democrats don't know what to protest. They just seem to instinctively want to resist and protest. They wouldn't even stand up for things that you would have thought any human would have felt compelled to do. So they're just sort of sticking their tongues out and crossing their arms and going into overdrive on the resistance mode. But meanwhile, we have a majority in the Senate. We have a majority in the House, and President Trump has the pen over at the White House. So we're moving forward, and I'm extremely optimistic about where we're headed.
I want to speak to the Democrats and their shenanigans last night just once, and we'll move on from it, because I think there's more important things to talk about in terms of the president's agenda and how to accomplish that in the halls of Congress. Mm-hmm. But we've not seen anything like, at least in my lifetime, I believe, Congressman Al Green having to be removed from the body. I mean, yep. It is a sad testimony that they cannot simply put partisan politics aside for a moment or two. I mean, the president has broken them. I don't know of any other better way to put it, Senator, that he has broken them in such a way that they cannot stand up and applaud a 13-year-old brain cancer survivor.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing Al Green get kicked out. I was with the speaker a little bit earlier today, Mike Johnson, and I complimented him on that. I said, thank you for standing up. Thank you for pushing back. And
that's right.
Let the American public see that this sort of behavior is where they want to go, and they're so out of touch. It's just shocking. So I'm glad that the speaker had him ejected. He warned him, gave him plenty of warning. I'm sure Al Green wanted the publicity, but he just I think this disrespect has gone to new heights.
Well, I would note that there were a lot of pink outfits in the audience. Those pink outfits were apparently to protest, quote unquote, anti-women Trump policies. This happening the same week that, as you well know, Senator, 45 members of the every Democrat in the United States Senate voted against protecting women's sports. Speak to that vote and speak to the hypocrisy of their quote unquote protest.
Well, Tommy Tuberville brought the vote to the floor. You know, he was coach at Auburn. He's been coach at a number of different universities. He's been coaching for his entire career. Mm-hmm. And he's been very clear, and he's extremely articulate about the fact that, both boys and girls, men and women, should have, great opportunities in sports. But when you start putting men into women's sports, seeing the injuries that happen to them, the poor girl that was there last night who had her just got hammered by a male volleyball player and injured her significantly. You think about this sort of stuff, and the American public definitely don't want boys playing in girls' sports, men playing in women's sports. You poll it, it's clear, but the Democrats are so out of touch that, as you said, they used the filibuster, which is the tool they wanted to do away with when they had control. They used the filibuster to block us yesterday. Every single Democrat voting against keeping boys out of girls' sports, which means they're for male competition with girls' sports. We got in our midst something very, very strange, and something I think the vast majority of Americans are against.
I mean, you draw the contrast between the sluggishness, the lack of activity in the Biden administration, and the incredible activity in the first 43, 44 days of the Trump administration. You could not be further apart. And obviously, by contrast, it makes it even more impressive what we see the president doing. How would you prioritize? I know it's difficult to do. I asked this of Congressman David Kustoff a little earlier today. So, I mean, if you think immigration and energy economy, the tariff front, obviously foreign policy, Ukraine, Russia, I mean, what would you put as number one on Senator Bill Hagerty's list of accomplishments in the first 43 days, or can you just identify only one?
Well, Matt, this is probably a little broader than you want me to specify. But if you just think about it at a high level, it's the sanctity of America again. It's if you think about our border, If you think about countries that have treated us poorly from an economic standpoint, that's why we're going in the tariffs direction. That is underlying the desire for President Trump to state that America truly is back, and we're going to protect the sovereignty of our nation. We're going to protect our economy, and we're going to protect our people from things like fentanyl. At a very high level, I say that's the number one goal, and it touches almost everything that President Trump is doing. So, bringing back a real sense of American pride instead of putting America last, as Joe Biden did. President Trump is very clearly putting America first in each of these actions. And when you go poll it, specifically, you'll find immigration at the top of the polling. But people want their city safe, anti-crime. We've had these sanctuary city mayors over in the House and Oversight Committee today trying to justify why they feed crime and don't enforce laws in their cities. The American public is against this. Defunding the police was never popular. And, I think the Democrats, again, you mentioned it earlier, they're just so out of touch. They're staying on this tone-deaf path of wokeness and DEI, and the American public has moved way past it.
Senator Bill Hagerty, our guest, Senator, you mentioned the Democrats' ability to utilize the filibuster, not able to overcome the 60-vote majority. It's shameful that 7 Democrats would not join the common sense Republicans in keeping men out of women's sports. That said, has there been discussion or consideration as things move through the House, as things move through the Senate? We understand that that's the only power that the Democrats currently have is to suggest that the filibuster will be used on some of this more controversial legislation. Is there any discussion amongst your colleagues about how to work around that? And I understand the sanctity of the filibuster, and I believe in it. I believe that the Senate should be the cooling down body of the Congress. Yep. But what can you say to that? And have you begun to address the possibility that they will use that to stop good legislation?
Well, I think they absolutely will. I think there's going to be a test coming up very soon. We're getting ready, perhaps as early as next week, to mark up my stablecoin legislation to try to make certain that the crypto technology development and innovation stays here in the United States, and also to strengthen the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. Right now, I have bipartisan support for that, but we'll see if they crumble on it. It's just a common sense piece of legislation that's good for our economy, and basically says to the crypto industry that we want to make an environment here that's clear and one that has certainty, so you can actually feel comfortable building your business here, growing your business here. The innovation is enormous that's going around the blockchain technology. I want to see it here in America. I don't want to push it offshore, which is what Biden is doing. We have bipartisan support right now. Let's see if it holds. But they are going to use this tool. If you look at that vote you and I have been talking about, to keep women in men's sport. To keep men in women's sports. It's absolutely absurd. And it seems like that's the path they're on. They're just lost and wandering in the wilderness, as far as I can tell.
It feels to me that with the tariff conversations, and it's always a difficult conversation to have because the Democrats try to vilify it, and they claim that Donald Trump wants to raise prices on this thing and that thing. And I know that he just put a moratorium for 3 of the biggest automakers in the United States for those big 3 for at least 1 month. What is your basic position on tariffs? And do you look at it, as I do, Senator, as a way to negotiate with these countries to get better trade deals with Canada, with Mexico, and to get other things from those countries that we need, such as border security in those 2 cases?
Well, it's not just a negotiating tactic. It's one that President Trump has deployed.
Sure.
I'm the only member of the United States Senate who actually served in President Trump's administration. And when I was ambassador to Japan, we pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the so-called TPP. The Japanese were furious, and I came back and said, we need to do a bilateral deal. That means a deal just between the United States and Japan. Because if you looked at the other partners to this TPP, we already had deals with half of them. But Japan was the one that was missing, and they fought us on getting a trade deal ever since the 1960s. And I think you know the history of this. MacArthur, the post-World War II economy was such that we made very favorable terms of trade for those nations whose economies had been devastated, like Japan, like Europe. But we should have time limited. We didn't. So now you have these incredible distortions, and countries, like Japan, like Europe, have taken advantage of those. And we were able to get 2 trade deals done with Japan. It never happened since World War II. We were able to accomplish 2 trade deals while I was ambassador there. And I think a large part because President Trump had already demonstrated that he was going to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum. He did it. And, I think the Japanese realized President Trump is serious. He's not just talking. He's going to do it. And I assured them that he would, but they found their way to the table, and we got much more favorable trade terms as a result of that. When President Trump was in office last time, he picked up the phone and called the president of Mexico and told AMLO that if you don't do something about this flood of people coming across, we're going to shut the border down from an economic standpoint. The next day, President Trump told me the next day, 18,000 Mexican soldiers are up there, federales, defending that border and pushing back on them. So he knows how to negotiate. I don't know that in history, I don't know that there'll be a better negotiator that we will see. And my sense is, and I had this argument with Canadian leaders just last week. They talk about how they've reduced the flow of fentanyl, or how fentanyl is a lower proportion coming from Canada than it is Mexico. Like, we should be okay with that. And I said, why don't you try telling that to the mother who lost her son? We want to stop this completely. There's not an acceptable level. And I think that's the point that President Trump is going to make. He's going to give his auto industry an opportunity to find ways to deal with it. What he wants to see is the production come back on shore. He wants to see the jobs back here. And in a sad state of affairs, Joe Biden took a lot of credit for increasing employment in America. But if you look at where those employment, you go down to the next level and say, where did the jobs grow and where did they decrease? The job growth was in government jobs and government-related jobs. Everybody else, manufacturing, for example, shrank.
Right. No. It's well spoken, Senator. Two more conversation points, and I know we're limited on time, but obviously we've not had an opportunity to speak with Senator Bill Hagerty since last week, since the Ukrainian deal fell apart, sadly, because Zelensky could not sit there, say thank you, and sign a deal. He did not seem to be able to do that. I was proud of the President of the United States for saying, you know what, when you seem like you want peace, you come back to us. He seems to be ready to do that now. Your thoughts on what happened last Friday and where that puts us with peace in that conflict?
Well, I think President Trump's going to get us to the right place. I think Zelensky completely embarrassed himself. And if you think about it, that may go down as one of the biggest diplomatic mistakes ever made. He initially was supposed to sign this deal with Scott Bessent, who is our Treasury Secretary, and he told Scott, no, I'm going to wait till I get to the Munich Security Conference. I'm going to sign it with Vice President Vance. He wouldn't sign it there, and he kept arguing, I need to go to the Oval Office and meet with President Trump himself. What he did, instead of showing appreciation and thanks for the $350 billion we sent over there, he tried to renegotiate the deal to try to trade up and try to create more advantage. And President Trump said, I'm not here to give one side or the other an advantage. I'm here to stop this. And Zelensky embarrassed himself and his nation. I would think that his ambassador would have resigned immediately after that. He got very bad advice if anybody advised him to perform that way. Now he's saying, I'm ready to sign it. I'll sign it anytime, anywhere. Huge diplomatic mistake. The American public has been far more generous than I felt was appropriate to Zelensky, and he's mismanaged the relationship in a I think just an embarrassing manner.
And final question, obviously Doge and Elon Musk, this organization has made a lot of inroads in identifying waste, fraud, and abuse in American government, in our federal government system. The Supreme Court today rejected the attempt to keep billions in foreign aid frozen through the USAID program. Does this create more of an urgency on the part of Congress to act, to kind of codify some of this and to draw back and claw back some of these monies that have been sent out to these organizations and these programs that we've identified as just extremely wasteful and unnecessary?
Oh, absolutely. We can help on this. And I had lunch with Elon Musk today. They're working at lightning speed. And he laughs that, they've got a 2-day advantage because the federal government bureaucracy goes to, they go home over the weekend. They're working straight through the weekend. So, they're working apace, and what they can't handle by executive order, we will work on legislation to deal with it. The other thing, though, I think the Democrats are going to greatly regret is that at every turn, they're going to the courts. That's always been their fallback position because they've had far more control over the court system in the past. Today, the Supreme Court is 6-3 conservative judges versus liberals. And to the extent that these challenges make their way to the Supreme Court, I'm not going to be surprised at all that the justices don't say, look, the bureaucracy has way overstepped its bounds. President Trump wins that way, he wins the other way. He wins both ways, which is that's the way he likes to set it up.